Hi and welcome to my little channel, where I talk about Ishanekon World Shapers, the probably biggest free tabletop RPG out there. Today we're talking about one of the best parts of Ishanekon World Shaper, character creation. One of the main design goals of this game is to allow you to build whatever kind of character you can imagine, giving you hundreds upon hundreds of options to achieve just that. It's awesome. I love creating creatures and player characters with this system. Just, too bad that I'm stuck as a forever GM, but I sometimes get to play them. But I want to show you how to quickly create a level 1 character. There's also a written guide online where you can read all these steps, link in the description below. But let's get started. In Ishanekon World Shapers, it is usually good to start with the main idea of your character. What kind of character do you want to play? And then today we're going to try to build a magical elven archer who uses arrows to ensnare their enemies and put all sorts of magical effects on them. Kinda a ranged weapon control hybrid type character. Once you've got the base idea, you can go and open up the character sheet. Ishanekon World Shapers offers an online character sheet, which I highly recommend, but we also have an Excel sheet version and a PDF version if you prefer that. But for now we're going to focus on the online character sheet. Now we're probably going to make one of the most important choices, your archetype and sub-archetype. Generally when you get to choose stuff in the system, like I already mentioned, there are a lot of choices. There are, for example, 140 sub-archetypes, almost 900 abilities, over 500 talents, and just trying to brute force it and looking at all of them is a bad approach if you're new to the system. That's why I implemented many filters to help you find your way around, which I really recommend you use. Even I use them, and I'm the creator of the system. So if we look at the archetype page, up at the top, we will see that we can filter by the beginner tag, which is good if you are brand new to tabletop RPGs. And for the archetypes, for example, it limits the choices from the 140 to only 20. But if this is your first time with Ishanekon World Shapers, but you already have experience with other tabletop RPGs, then I recommend the core tag, which limits us to the most important 60 choices, which cover all the basics. You can also filter by complexity rating. 1 are super simple features and sub-archetypes, which are recommended for any sort of player. 2 ramps up a bit the complexity, but also has more interesting options. 3 is more advanced stuff that usually only works with specific builds, or the rules are not that straightforward. And 4 is the highest level complexity. Stuff like that includes summoning abilities, where you have to manage a second creature, or transformation abilities, where you have to switch between multiple sheets, or it's hyper-specific stuff. But let's just presume that I'm a player who is new with Ishanekon World Shapers, but has experience with tabletop RPGs. So we're gonna take core. You can also see here are filters for different type of character roles. We want somebody who fights with ranged weapons, but also has control features. So I'm going to filter for ranged weapon user and control, and if we scroll down we see only one sub-archetype left, the ranger, which is of the nature archetype. If we look at the ranger, it has a complexity level of 2, which should not be a problem for somebody who has experience with tabletop RPGs. He's good with melee weapons, ranged weapons and control, exactly what we're looking for. And if we look at the description, the ranger uses maneuver abilities in combination with the weapon to hinder enemies. That sounds exactly like the kind of character we're looking for. So let's take a look what the nature archetype and the ranger gives us and add that to the character sheet. Nature gives us 5 vitality and 3 willpower per level and 1 ability per level. This means it's a hybrid archetype, which is good with weapons and abilities. Good for our magical archer, chooses a bow, but enhances it with abilities and magic spells. And also we need to start inserting all the features and proficiencies the nature archetype gives us. Vitality, willpower, skill points, and the number of abilities we learned are automatically calculated in. The armor proficiency is also filled in automatically, which is light and medium armor. But for the weapon proficiency we get a choice. We get simple weapons and either medieval, military or unearthly weapons. We want that bow, so we're taking medieval weapons. If you're not sure what weapons are in which category, go look under lists, items, and weapons and armor, where you can find a list of all weapons. Then we fill in our primary stat, which is instinct. We get to choose our secondary stat between strength and dexterity, and I think dexterity fits far better with our archer fantasy, so we're taking dexterity. And then we add our evasion stat, which is instinct. Let's take a look at our archetype feature. Difficult terrain does not slow you down. You can climb and swim as fast as you can run, and you gain the lesser talent quick on your feet, elemental weapon, climber, jumper, made for the ground or made for water. You can look under lesser talents what each of them do. To be quick about it, quick on your feet gives you 1 extra meter of basic movement. Elemental weapon allows you to switch our weapon's damage to heat, cold, shock, chemical, or cold damage. Climber increases our climbing speeds and allows us to climb without hands. Jumper significantly increases our jumping range and height. Made for the ground allows us to bury effectively through the earth. And made for the water allows us to swim effectively and breathe underwater. I think elemental weapon fits greatly with our magical archer type. So we're taking elemental weapon, just adding it to the lesser talents. And here we go to the ranger. Let's look at the first feature that it gives us. You can learn abilities from the war archetype, which means we get access to a lot of weapon maneuver features, which is exactly what we want. You can switch the primary or secondary stat of a weapon to instinct if neither of them already are. This helps us wield a bigger variety of weapons. And you can add a 1d6 to the attack rolls of your weapon attacks if you use a maneuver ability on it, which significantly increases the chance that our controlling maneuver abilities actually hit the target. Later on we get features that allows us to give targets that we hit with maneuver ability attacks, elemental status effects, or knock them prone. And that feature keeps getting strong and strong on higher levels. Next is an optional step, traits. To use traits you need the permission of your game master. Traits allows you to create truly crazy types of characters. Simpler things like you're missing an arm, or maybe you have phobia, to more extreme things that maybe you want to play as a dog, or a dragon and vampire and so on, allowing you to take negative traits which then allow you to buy positive traits. But our magical elven archer is close enough to a standard humanoid that we don't really need it, plus this can overcomplicate the character build, and for a beginner I highly suggest not tinkering with traits. And there's a reason why they are optional. Power gamers can absolutely abuse them. Traits are primarily there as a roleplay helping tool. So GMs, beware who you give the permission to use traits. And maybe take an extra look to make sure that they didn't abuse anything, like taking traits that make your weapons attack weaker when they're just planning to play a straight caster or stuff like that. But let's continue with the next choice, path. The path determines the core mechanic that your character revolves around. You can pick them right in the character sheet, but if you want more details, it's not a bad idea to go to lists, abilities and features, and path to see them in an overview and to filter them. For example, we are a ranged weapon user, and let's limit it to complexity 2 for now, which leaves us with path of attack and path of maneuver. Path of attack is the default path for almost all weapon users, which I highly recommend if you're building a character which primarily uses weapons. Path of maneuver allows you to play your weapon user more like a caster, which, to be fair, fits with the type of character we want to play. But to keep it simple, we're sticking to the complexity 1 path of attack instead of going for path of maneuver. What do we get from path of attack? We get an extra free lesser talent, and more importantly, on higher tiers, we will start to get the option to either increase the damage of our main weapon attack with the attack action, or to grant us an additional attack that deals half damage. Which allows you to customize your character on higher levels to either deal one devastating attack or multiple weaker attacks. But that's something we have to worry about in the future when we level up. So now we just take path of attack and get that extra lesser talent. Now it's time to set our stats. The stats are the core of your character. Each stat gives you a specific bonus. The minimum of each stat point is 7, and we have 28 stat points that we can distribute freely to a maximum of 13 in each stat. You can see how many stat points you have left under points left on the right. First, I would suggest that we maximize our primary secondary and evasion stat. So instinct goes to 13 and so does dexterity. Next you have to think about if your character is wielding weapons, what kind of stats they have. Again, you can see them in the list where you can find all the weapons. We will have a bow. There are 3 types of bows in the game: short bows, composite bows, and long bows. I think we're going to take a long bow, fitting for the elven archer, but all 3 options are viable. The long bow requires strength and dexterity, but thanks to our first ranger feature, we can change one of those tests to instinct. I would suggest we change strength to instinct, so that now we require instinct and dexterity, which represent our primary and secondary stat. Now for the rest of the stats, it's mostly a question of flavor, but each stat also grants you a bonus. Strength increases your inventory space and increases your jumping range. Dexterity increases your evasion. Constitution increases your vitality and temporary vitality. Intelligence grants you more skill points. Charisma increases your narrative momentum, which you can use to reroll dice or spend them on cinematic actions. Instinct increases your initiative, and will increases your willpower and temporary vitality. We're going for weaker strength, weaker constitution, great intelligence, good charisma, and decent will. Now for the skills. Skills represent all sort of things where your character can be trained in or has natural talent in. There are many skills to choose. If you want to know more, look in the character rules, where you can read a short description of all the skills, but I'm not going through all of them right now. You can see how many skill points you have left right under where you can see how many stat points you have left. I'm just going to quickly put some in animal handling, grace, nimbleness, perception, quick fingers, stealth, supernatural, and survival, which I think is fitting for our magical elven ranger. You start with 2 languages, but you can spend skill points to get additional languages. But let's stick with the 2. Since we're an elven archer, I say we get common and elvish. If you're not sure what kind of languages exist in your setting, ask your game master. And we get to choose lesser talents. At level 1 you get 1 lesser talent, but Path of Attacks gives us an additional lesser talent, and thanks to our nature archetype feature, we got the elemental weapon lesser talent for free. Again, I highly recommend that you use the filters. There are over 300 lesser talents, so please use them. If you're new, I will take two-handed attacker to deal more damage with our bow, and since we're an elf, I'm going to take night vision to be able to see in the dark, so that we also have some utility to offer. Next we get to choose abilities. Abilities can be anything from a stealth to a combat maneuver or some sort of trick you're using. There are almost 900 abilities, so there are a ton of choice. Again, please use the filters. The number of abilities we get depends on the archetype. Martial type archetypes like Bulwark and War only start with 2, hybrid types like Nature starts with 3, and caster archetypes like Creative, Mental, and Reality start with 4. So let's pick our 3 abilities, and very important, filter by your archetype, because your archetype limits the type of abilities you can learn. Also important, our character is level 1, which means he's tier 1, so he can only learn tier 1 abilities. So it doesn't hurt to filter by tier, so you don't accidentally pick an ability of a higher tier. We want some ranged weapon control abilities, so we're going to filter by ranged weapon user and control, and by core and complexity 1 and 2. And there are some great options here. Trip attack, for example, or blinding attack. But for our first ability, I'm going to pick net attack, so that we can pin down an enemy and prevent him from moving around. And I also like an elemental attack. We've got heat strike, cold strike, chemical strike, shock strike, and poison strike. All of them are definitely viable choices, which we are probably going to pick all of them while leveling up. But for now, I'm just going to check this shock strike, which allows us to shoot electrical arrows that can shock the enemy, potentially preventing them from even doing their turn. We've got some great combat options. But how about we round up the kit with some out of combat utility? So let's filter by utility. Here we've got some interesting choices. Grappling hook to get a higher vantage point, or safe fall to preventing us or an ally to taking fall damage. But I think I'm going with camouflage, which gives an ally of our choice advantage on stealth checks for 4 hours. So I think this will be helpful in our adventuring days. Time for the last step, our items. We get up to 3 weapons, 1 armor, 1 bag, and equipment. When it comes to weapons, we already know we're going to take the longbow. And it's always good to have a backup weapons when forced into melee or ranged combat if you are a combat class. So I'm going to take a one-handed sword. Don't forget, we can adjust one of the stats with each of the weapons. So let's take the primary stat of the longbow and turn that into instinct, and let's take the secondary stat of the one-handed sword and also turn that into instinct. Armor-wise, we could take close, light or medium armor. All types of armor are viable. The lighter the armor, the more evasions you get. The heavier the armor, the more armor you get. So I suggest you take that which flavor-wise best fits the character you're imagining. I think light armor will be great for a magical elven archer, so I'm picking that. Do not forget to equip the armor so that the values are calculated in the character sheet accordingly. Now equipment. Equipment represents all sorts of items that your character would carry around, that they need for their abilities, and also your ammunition. So if you want to shoot that bow, you need an equipment. And then you also get a bag. In a bag you can transport all sorts of items and trinkets which are not part of the official rules, and you can also put crafting material in there without those affecting your inventory space. So don't worry about packing in background story items of your character which have no direct beneficial effect and other stuff. You can write those down in the custom inventory. And that's it! Congratulations! You created a character in Ishanekon World Shapers. I hope you have fun with it. I know I had fun creating this character. Again, Ishanekon World Shapers is completely free. You can find everything on the official website, link in the description below. And if you're looking for a game, our Discord community is always open for new players looking for a chance to try out the game. And also each month I have a stream, Ishanekon Arena, where everybody who wants to try out the game is invited and where you'll be facing different themed challenges. Also, if you're interested in supporting the development of Ishanekon World Shapers, I have a Ko-fi where you can become a monthly paying member. And I also got merch. I mean, look at this. I love it. Also, I've got a t-shirt. In case you're wondering why my teddy bear is wearing it and not me, it's definitely not because I accidentally ordered an XS t-shirt instead of an XL t-shirt. Definitely not. The system itself will be free, no matter how much or little support I get. So if you just want to try it out, go for it. Hope to see you around. Bye.